Hello again, everybody. I'm Roger Hoover. Glad to welcome you back to the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and welcome to this Tuesday edition of Crimson Drive presented by Coca-Cola. We're excited to look back at Alabama's last game against Ole Miss and already start looking ahead to what's coming up this Saturday when the Crimson Tide travel to College Station, Texas to face the Texas A&M Aggies. Our friends at RJ Young have delivered us this smart board, which we're going to use to go through our headlines for today, and RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. First of all, coming up on the show today, we're going to take you back to the broadcast booth for Alabama against Ole Miss with our Royal Furniture booth cam highlights, as you'll get to take a look at Eli Gold, John Parker Wilson, Chris Stewart, Rashad Johnson, as they called the Alabama-Ole Miss game. Some great highlights from a great win for the Crimson Tide this past Saturday. So first of all, we'll have our booth cam highlights, and then we'll have Coach's Checklist as head coach Nick Saban met with the media on Monday. You'll hear what's really on his mind, plus a very important injury update that he had early in the press conference. Then for the big picture, we're pleased to be joined by Jamie Erdahl, the sideline reporter for CBS, who became part of the story, it seemed, on Saturday, thanks to her pregame interview with Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin. We'll talk about that, as well as interview legendary head coach Gene Stallings. We call this segment Alabama Legends, and that certainly lives up to the billing this week for Coach Stallings, leading Alabama to a 1992 national championship, but also he's a former head coach of Texas A&M. He played for the Aggies, so he's the perfect guest to visit with this week as we get ready for Alabama against Texas A&M. Some other football headlines, of course, the win on Saturday was impressive as Alabama jumped out to a 35-0 lead, eventually gets the win 42-21 over previously unbeaten and 12th-ranked Ole Miss. Brian Robinson Jr., 4 touchdowns on the day, no surprise, he's the SEC Offensive Player of the Week. Will Anderson Jr., no surprise as well, he's the SEC Defensive Player of the Week. He's done that in the last 2 big SEC games for the Crimson Tide against Florida and Ole Miss, and even Lane Kiffin talked about it post-game. I know he's got another year still left to go in college, but he should be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft right now. High praise for Will Anderson Jr. And we also know, even though we're gearing up for this Saturday's game against Texas A&M, we always learn about a week or 2 weeks out in advance what the game time will be. And Mississippi State, October 16th in Starkville. That'll be a 6 p.m. kickoff at Starkville Davis Wade Stadium, so we're looking forward to that coming up. Our radio airtime will be 3 o'clock coming up in a couple weeks for Alabama against Mississippi State. Taking a look at some other headlines, the soccer team really had a great win on Friday night. In case you missed it, it was scoreless until the 85th minute, and that is when Reina Reyes scored to give Alabama the only goal. It was a header goal, a very good service in as well. 1-0 was the final score over 24th-ranked LSU, a team that the week before had been ranked top 5 in the nation. So great to see that for Reina. And, of course, the SEC took note, naming her the Offensive Player of the Week. Now the Crimson Tide have a huge matchup coming up against the Arkansas Razorbacks, one of the best teams in the nation, picked to win the SEC. They've won the regular season crown the last 2 years, so it's a huge test coming up at number 4 Arkansas coming up on Thursday. Alabama soccer, of course, getting ready to take on the Arkansas Razorbacks. A lot else coming up around Alabama athletics. The volleyball team, they were on the road this past weekend, had a couple of losses to the Auburn Tigers, but they'll be back in action welcoming in the defending national champion Kentucky coming up on Saturday at Foster Auditorium. Baseball team over at the Joe, week 4 of fall practice is underway. A full schedule is available at RolledTide.com. Hopefully the weather cooperates with the Crimson Tide coming up for some baseball outdoors. Men's basketball, training camps are starting. Herbert Jones already playing well for the New Orleans Pelicans. There are 6 former Alabama players in NBA training camps, so we're looking forward to seeing that coming up and see who will be on some opening day rosters around the association. And then a big reminder about this afternoon, we will have Greg Byrne live, the Director of Athletics for the University of Alabama. Always has a monthly chat with us on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. We'll get his thoughts on a variety of topics, talking a lot about the start to the football season, but also about basketball season that's coming up, including Tide tip-off that is scheduled for October 21st at Foster Auditorium to showcase the men's and women's basketball teams as they get ready for the upcoming season. So hope you can all join us coming up at 3:30 for that conversation with Greg Byrne right back here on the CTSN Facebook page. It'll be archived as well on all of our social media outlets. As we get ready to begin this edition of Crimson Drive after our RJ Young headlines, it's time to take a look at the booth cam highlights. We always love this to kind of put a bow on the previous game, and it was such a great win for the Crimson Tide against Ole Miss. Now let's go back to Saturday. Let's go back to the broadcast booth at Bryant-Denny Stadium.
Now it's going to be a 4th down and a yard. 4th and a yard. Running back, Ely finds an opening, gets stacked up. I don't think he got there. I don't believe he made it. I don't believe he made it. Alabama's Jordan Battle came through, helped by others, and they took it away from Ely right when they needed the big play. Claps his hands a second time. Here now he steps back, looks, throws into the end zone. Touchdown, Alabama! John Mechie's second reception of the year for a touchdown. And Alabama goes 16 yards on that play to take the lead on the Ole Miss Rebels.
Bryce Young makes it look easy right there, going to inside post route, but it was looking to the outside first to Billingsley. It wasn't there, and a really good job of Mechie understanding you're back to the back of the end zone, starts working back to his quarterback. Bryce steps up in the pocket, throws a perfect ball. But what time from the offensive line, giving Bryce the ability to go through his reads. Bryce finds it, throws a strike for the touchdown.
Oots is the up back. Robinson is the tailback. The quarterback is under center. He'll send Billingsley in motion, who will then return to the left of the formation. Here's the give. Robinson, touchdown, Alabama! And the Tide takes a 2-touchdown lead over the Ole Miss Rebels. A 1-yard run for Brian Robinson. It'll be his third rushing touchdown of the season.
This is a bold move right here.
It is 4th and 1. Rebels in their own 31. Jerry and Ely is the running back. Again, they are at their own 31. A 4th down and 1. Ely in motion. Here's the toss outside. Bama's 2-0. Got him. Going down. Henry. Got him. What a great play. And Alabama holds again on downs. That was spectacular.
It's same play that a Florida would have run a couple of weeks ago. It was a speed option. He unblocked the defensive end. That was Drew Sanders, comes up and takes the quarterback and then toe-to-toe, getting the flip, coming down Rashad, making a big tackle. And a guy that had a lot of criticism after Florida. That was a big play from number 10.
Yeah, like you said, had a lot of criticism. A great play call that Dan Mullen and Florida was doing that week. But you see, he got in the film room, learned from his mistakes, and played a smart play there because the running back was on the opposite side. So he bounced him over to the field to run the speed option. He was already on top of it. Great play from Drew Sanders, freshman, and Henry To'oTo'o, new guy on campus.
4th down and a half yard. Heading towards the end zone to our left. Robbie Oots is in as the fullback. The backs are in the I. Quarterback under center. Motion Jaleel Billingsley. Here's the play action fake and open, wide open. Cameron Latu. Touchdown, Alabama. 1:09 remaining until halftime. Bama leads 21-0, threatening again. Here's the snap, the give, Robinson. Touchdown, Alabama. Brian Robinson a yard away. And the Tide is on top 27-0. Tide breaks the huddle, comes to the line of scrimmage. Robinson to the left side of his quarterback. Here's the snap. There's the give. He bobbled it momentarily, but he carries it in for a touchdown. And we're down to 11:45 to go in the game. Bama leads 35-7. But all of a sudden, we're looking at a 3rd and 19 for the Crimson Tide.
We're going the wrong way.
Yeah.
Even money throws a touchdown right here.
Bama 5 of 9 and 3rd down conversions. 3 wides left, 1 to the right. Here's the snap. Bryce steps up. Bryce looks. Bryce loads up and throws. Caught at the 2-yard line. Taken by Jamison Williams. And he's out of bounds at the 1. Chris, you almost had it, man. You missed by a yard.
I was headed to the car.
It should have been a touchdown.
It should have been.
Well, I want to see it give to Brian Robinson again. He's already having a career day of 137 yards and 3 touchdowns. Why stop now?
Robbie Oots is the up man. For Robinson, looking for another TD. He finds the opening and he's in. Touchdown again. Brian Robinson's 4th touchdown of the day. A minute to go in the ball game. Bama on top 42-21, and it has not been that close. Here's the 3rd down snap. When the clock gets to 1, handoff Robinson, goes right, comes left. He'll stand up for a while. And that's going to do it. There's 39 seconds on the game clock. The play clock is 40. So this one is done. The Alabama Crimson Tide with a 42-21 win over Ole Miss. Nick Saban now 24-0 against his former assistants.
That shows you why on your game day Saturdays, even if you're watching the game on television, on your phone, iPad, tablet, laptop, pull up the booth cam on the Crimson Tide Sports Network Facebook page just to watch the reactions. It was really fun in that last highlight sequence from the Ole Miss game to see the interactions between Eli Gold, the spotter, Butch Owens, as well as Chris Stewart, John Parker Wilson, just everybody having a good time in the booth. And it was easy to have a good time in the booth with a 42-21 win over the Ole Miss Rebels. Monday, Coach Saban, of course, has the 24-hour rule, so it's time to focus on the next opponent, the Texas A&M Aggies. And yesterday, he met with the media as we look back just a little bit to the Ole Miss game, but really start looking forward to what's coming up on Saturday with Texas A&M. Here is Coach's checklist from Monday.
A lot of the same thoughts after the last game. Players played hard in the game, stayed focused. I think the offense did a great job of controlling the tempo of the game. Played very well. Offensive line did a really, really good job of controlling the line of scrimmage, and obviously B-Rob had a great day. Bryce did a good job taking what the defense would give. I think the defense played hard, got really critical stops and critical times in the game, which gave us great field position and set up some scores with a turnover. There's one thing we probably need to continue to develop is our ability to finish, whether it's a tackle, whether it's a block, whether it's a quarter, whether it's a game, whether it's, stacking positive performance from play to play, game to game, practice to practice, however you want to put it. And I think that would help us be a little bit more consistent. You've got the players of the week. We're proud of B-Rob for being National Player, Walter Camp, and SEC Player of the Week, and Will Anderson being the Defensive Player of the Week. So always great, to see our players get recognized for positive performance. I think, this is a very challenging game that we have coming up against a very good team. These guys have 15 starters coming back from, one of the best teams in the country last year. And this is a very challenging place to play. Jimbo does a great job getting his teams ready to play. He's a very good offensive play caller. They got a great defensive team. They're one of the top defensive teams in the country, one of the tops in the SEC. Points allowed, 12.5 points a game is, really, pretty phenomenal. And they've got some really good players up front. They're really good in the secondary. Offensively, they got a great back in Spiller. Nia Smith is a really good wide receiver, very versatile player, punt returner, kickoff returner, catch and run it, beat you deep. Really good player all around. Got a really good tight end. So they've got a lot of good players. They're really good on special teams. They've got good team speed. They've got really, really good specialists, punter and kicker. So this is all around, a really, really good team. Maybe the best team we've played to this point from a personnel standpoint. So this is a game that, we really got to get our mind looking forward to the challenge that we have, which is going to be pretty significant. Yeah, Jace has got a knee. He'll be out for the year. He's going to have surgery tomorrow, so he's out.
Coach Saban with Coach's Checklist from Monday. He'll be talking later in the week with Jamie Erdahl of CBS Sports as once again, Alabama is playing on CBS this Saturday when the Crimson Tide make the trip to College Station to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. And we've been able to see a lot of our friend Jamie as well as her partners Gary Danielson and Brad Nessler calling Alabama football on CBS. They had the Florida game, plus the Ole Miss game, and now coming up, Texas A&M as well. So we figured it was a good time to visit with Jamie Erdahl and get her thoughts on the Crimson Tide and also some thoughts on a former Alabama offensive coordinator named Lane Kiffin. His pregame interview really was the talk of Twitter on Saturday, so that's where we start this conversation with Jamie Erdahl. Jamie, I have the Coca-Cola, but I forgot to bring the popcorn. How's everything going?
It's awesome. Yeah, that popcorn does taste a little better with some Coca-Cola, so you are missing that snack.
No doubt. And that became the talk of Saturday. Of course, Alabama had the big win, played really well against Ole Miss, but it was your pregame interview with Lane Kiffin. Just kind of talk us through that entire interview, especially the ending to it.
Yeah, it was really the entire interview wasn't very long, which is normally how they go before kickoff. So that really wasn't surprising to me. But the way I asked my question, I just felt like he didn't like give me a football answer. That I really wanted something that was a little bit more tactile to like how they could beat Alabama. So all I was trying to do was clarify what exactly he maybe meant by, I hope we have more pieces of paper to his notes that he had from his time at Alabama. And then as he clarified yesterday, he just kind of had the popcorn line in his head from his speech in the locker room or somebody said it. So didn't really bother me any, it wasn't about me. It was about him playing Alabama and he was probably fired up. So it was entertaining. I mean, whatever, it's good TV.
Lane Kiffin is always entertaining. How stunned were you that he kind of ended as fast as he did and then had the headset drop after the stare into the camera?
I don't think I'm as stunned that he ended it quickly because, like I said, those interviews are usually abrupt. But the toss of the headset was not one I had seen before. But again, and I had never met him before that day. Having kind of my time in the SEC is pretty short, and then having not had one of their games before. So it was just, but knowing what I've learned about his personality, like he's a character, and that's what works for him. And I think that's why he's loved.
And then we see Alabama play so well in the first half, build up that huge 35-0 lead, and I'm sure you kind of probably forgotten about the popcorn line at some point until you saw the mascot of the Crimson Tide, Big Al.
I did, and I was just amazed that Big Al had that popcorn costume. I mean, what a story that thing was stored in Coleman Coliseum for basketball games. I guess the more I thought about it, not surprising that it's there for a basketball game. That totally makes sense, but those people need raises who were able to find that thing so quickly, get Big Al into it. And I thought it was fantastic. As did Coach Kiffin, I guess.
Certainly was a great moment from a great win for the Crimson Tide. And early on this season, you got to see Alabama a lot. Just what have you liked about covering this team, getting to know Coach Saban more, of course, but also the student athletes?
This team year in, year out, I swear they impress me earlier in the season every year I'm around them. The expectation is always there. So, of course, there could be some speed bumps along the way, especially in September. The thing that Coach Saban seems to be harping on the most, which I would agree with, not that my opinion matters whatsoever, but is that full 60-minute effort that he's looking for. They always seem to find it, by early December when they need it. But I would agree. In that Florida game in the second quarter, they just flatlined a little bit. And I like something Coach Saban told us last week in our meeting with him, which is when the energy goes down for this team, they start to look ordinary, which is ridiculous because nothing Alabama football does is usually ordinary. But I think that's a good way for him to get his point across to the guys that this is a team that cannot just be ordinary. If you want to win the way that this program has, then you have to really sustain the effort. And I think it sounds like that's kind of his biggest issue he's had with this team.
Looking back at the 3 games you've covered, any favorite stories you've been able to tell about the players on this Alabama team?
I'm just so impressed with Bryce Young. I mean, I've been around now Tua and Mac, and they're impressive, but Bryce Young, man, not even from a football perspective. It is like you sit down with that young man and it is like, I'm sorry, how old are you again? Like he's mature. And something I said to Gary Danielson after we met with Bryce the other day was he has these really long answers to questions when you're in a production meeting with him. And Gary said, yeah, he's thinking of his answer as he's talking. And that's a skill, I would say. And it's one that you don't often see such a young man have, but he kind of plays quarterback that way, which I think is a cool parallel that when he gets in trouble, he doesn't really hit a panic button. He just keeps thinking and keeps working. And it's almost a little bit like Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady, but more Rodgers, that the longer they stay upright, it's like, oh crap, like the play that's going to come out of this is going to be bad. If you just let him stand there and think, the worse it's going to get.
That's led to some great moments for Alabama so far this season. As you mentioned, you've covered Alabama before under Tua and Mac Jones as well at quarterback. Also, last year you got to cover Crimson Tide football as we were right in the heart of the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, we're still battling the pandemic, but things are different this year. Stadium's back at full capacity. What's been the biggest change for you in your game day routine with everything in 2021?
Brad and Gary and I think would all agree that we feel like we're humming from a production standpoint. And I swear it's because we get to have dinner together. And it's like, that's not a joke. Like, it's the fact that, because a couple games last year, honest to gosh, the first time Brad tossed to me in a game was the first time we interacted all weekend. It was terrible. Like, and that's not how, I mean, you can't expect a team to go out and perform without practicing. And if Brad and Gary and I haven't interacted all weekend face to face, it's not that it would be bad, but it just feels clunky. We want it to be a good listen from a broadcast perspective, and that's really hard to accomplish when you don't see your people in the days leading up to the game. So for us, that has been just the biggest change, is being able to see our producer and director and everybody that works on our crew, who are just incredible, in a face-to-face capacity, whether it be in passing, because we weren't even allowed the compound, the trucks on a Friday last year to quarantine, and because of our testing protocols. So we're still masking up when we're there on Fridays. We all want to do the game. So we're being as safe as we possibly can, because none of us want to, get sick. So I would say that's been the biggest thing. And also meeting with the coaches and players again, face to face, has been fantastic. I mean, Zoom is great for things like this, but I would rather, give Nick Saban a pound than a wave over Zoom.
Absolutely. Where was the dinner spot in Tuscaloosa for you guys?
Chuck's. We went to Chuck's, and then Friday night I got takeout from the Italian spot on University De Palmas. Yes, and that was fantastic.
Two really good choices. So that was for you this past weekend in Tuscaloosa, but now you get to see Alabama again coming up in College Station. If you could just kind of take us through the week as you go along getting ready. What's your preparation process like after the last game is over up until kickoff of the next game?
Well, you said it. This is my third Alabama game this season, so already I'm kind of making sure I'm talking to different players and not just talking to the same guys. So today I'll talk to Texas A&M players. Tomorrow I have calls with Alabama lined up with Phil Mathis, Will Anderson, and I forget who else I have, Slade Bolden. So that's because I talked to Bryce for the last two games. So it's like I have my good Bryce stuff and I don't really want to wear him out. So you got to spread the love a little bit, make sure that you have other stuff to talk about. I think I'm talking to Brandon Robinson too. But so during the week for me, it's just me talking to the players on the phone, getting their backstories, making sure I kind of know the intricacies of their football prep and just anything that happened to them in the off season. So when they have a big game like B-Rob did, you have a little something to add to the broadcast. And then Thursday I travel. Friday we meet with the home team extensively, coordinators, coaches, and then we'll talk with Nick Saban on Zoom Friday night, and then game day. So it's a lot, but this the knowledge of the programs, especially Alabama, starts to snowball when you have them so frequently.
Now you get to go to College Station, get to see the 12th man. Is this one of your favorite environments in college football?
So I'm biased kind of away from Texas A&M. I've heard it's amazing. However, I've only been there twice, and one of them was a COVID game last year. So it was I haven't really experienced it the way that other people have. This will be my first primetime game there. So I am looking forward to it fighting, with some of my other favorite kind of night game atmospheres, which is Tiger Stadium and Tuscaloosa. So I'm sure it'll match.
Well, we're looking forward to it as Alabama looks to keep this undefeated season going and this long streak going. And Jamie, you do a great job for CBS. Just thank you so much for spending some time with us on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Look forward to your broadcast coming up on Saturday.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Big thank you to Jamie Erdahl of CBS for joining us. Again, she will be on the call, roaming the sidelines for CBS on Saturday night when Alabama makes the trip to Kyle Field to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. Alabama gets to see the 12th man for the first time since 2019 when Tua Tagovailoa led Alabama to a great victory there. Jalen Waddle had a big game back in 2019, and somebody that starred for the Aggies all the way back, at Kyle Field, but back in the 1950s, of course, is Gene Stallings, who is one of the Junction Boys playing for Coach Paul Bear Bryant and his first Texas A&M teams, eventually winners of the Southwest Conference. And Coach Stallings had the honor of not only coaching the Crimson Tide, but also Texas A&M throughout his legendary coaching tenure. So we figured it was a great time for our Alabama Legend series this week to also focus a little bit on Texas A&M as we visit with the legendary Gene Stallings over the phone. Time to visit with our weekly Alabama Legend here on Crimson Drive, presented by Coca-Cola. Roger Hoover now pleased to be joined by former head coach of not only the Alabama Crimson Tide, but also the Texas A&M Aggies, Gene Stallings, who joins us now on the phone. And Coach Stallings, Roll Tide, it's great to hear you. How's everything going?
Roger, everything's going fine, and Roll Tide again. They're going to have a good game this weekend and playing the Aggies, and the Aggies had said that they were going to beat Alabama, so we'll just have to wait and see how that if they do.
We're certainly excited for Saturday. And how special is it for you each year when Alabama and Texas A&M played, especially since the Aggies joined the SEC?
People would ask me all the time, who did I want to win? Alabama or A&M, and I'd say, well, do you have children? They said, yeah, we have children. I said, which one do you love the most? So they quit asking me that question. So when I talk about who I want to win, I just want the best football team to win.
Well, and recently that's been Alabama. Have you enjoyed watching the Crimson Tide so far this season? What stands out to you about Alabama?
I have, and I just can't believe how good they are. They beat everybody they play 30 or 40 points, and I think they'll do the same thing this coming weekend. They're just having a great year. They're well coached. They've got good football players, and when you have the best players and they're well coached, that's a tough combination to beat.
And how about for the Aggies? They got off to a good start at 3-0, but losses the last two times out to Arkansas and Mississippi State.
Well, they didn't play anybody the first 2 or 3 games. They sort of gimme games, and I'd been surprised if they won 3-0. But they really need to win this game. If they could beat Alabama, they'd be back sort of where they felt like they would be.
So many connections between Alabama and Texas A&M, and I know for you it really starts with Coach Bryant and with your time in Junction, Texas. So what do you remember about the first time you met Coach Bryant and going through that experience as a Junction boy?
Well, the first time I met Coach Bryant, we were at what they call the Grove there at A&M, and Ray George was the coach at A&M, and they had fired him, and they hired this guy by the name of Paul Bryant. None of us in this part of the country knew anything about any conference other than the Southwest Conference. And Alabama was from the SEC, and we just sort of, we didn't know who Coach Bryant was. It didn't take us long, we knew who he was.
No doubt. A tremendous run that he had at Texas A&M. Eventually left to go to Alabama, his alma mater, as he said, Mama called. But you got to know him throughout the years as well. What did A&M still mean to him even after he left College Station and came back to Alabama?
It did. And, in the Cotton Bowl, Texas A&M played Alabama in the Cotton Bowl game, and that brought back memories to him. And I was coaching at A&M, and we played Alabama in the Cotton Bowl game, and that was an important game, even though his team didn't play quite as well as they played in the other parts of the year. We won the game, but they were the best football team.
Were you nervous coaching against Coach Bryant for the first time? We heard from Bill Battle a couple weeks ago that he didn't sleep a wink the night he coached against him the first time.
Yeah, I was excited, but it was just the next game on our schedule. We'd started off losing 4 in a row and end up winning 7 in a row, and had the privilege of going to the Cotton Bowl, and I was glad that they picked Alabama in the Cotton Bowl game. It was not because I wanted to play Alabama. It was because I wanted my players to be exposed to Coach Bryant. And I just they've heard me talk about him so much, I just wanted them to be in the same room with him and experience some of the things that he would say.
Well, here in 2021, Alabama against Texas A&M. And, Coach, before we let you go, the game this year is going to be in College Station. Just what gives Kyle Field such a great home field advantage? What is it about the game day atmosphere in College Station that's so special?
Well, the atmosphere for the for the visiting team is just outstanding. Texas A&M shows great respect to the visiting opponents. It doesn't make any difference who it is. It'll be a special game because of Alabama's the number one team in the country, and Texas A&M is trying to get there. They hadn't got there yet, but Jimbo Fisher has them on the right path. And if they could just, I doubt very seriously if they could beat Alabama, but if they could just play them a good game, I think that would help the feelings of the Aggies quite a bit.
Coach Gene Stallings led Alabama to a national championship in 1992, also a former head coach and player at Texas A&M. Coach, just thank you so much for joining us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. All the best to you and your family. Roll Tide.
Lesson, a good game. Thank you.
Gene Stallings, one of the best ever for both Texas A&M and Alabama. Great to visit with him earlier today to get his thoughts on, like he said, it's kind of like picking between children at this point, how much he loves both Alabama and Texas A&M. Well, this is only halfway of our preparation for what's coming up on the Crimson Tide Sports Network on Crimson Drive, at least getting you ready for Saturday's game between the Tide and the Aggies, as we'll be back coming up on Thursday at 2 p.m. Central for our next edition of Crimson Drive. Also want to let you know that in about an hour we will be joined on the CTSN Facebook page by the Director of Athletics for the University of Alabama, Greg Byrne, to kind of get an update on how the month of September went for Alabama athletics, plus where things stand now in October, plus really keep an eye on what's coming up with basketball season starting, fall sports in full swing. Great time to visit with Director of Athletics Greg Byrne, so hopefully all of you can join me back here coming up in just about an hour, just around 3:30. We'll be joined by the Director of Athletics Greg Byrne. Special thanks to our guests that we've had today, Jamie Erdahl of CBS, as well as legendary head coach of the Crimson Tide and the Aggies, Gene Stallings. Thanks as well to our producer, Ethan Carabin, for putting this show together and getting us on the web for this show today, first on YouTube and also later on our Facebook page. For everybody with the University of Alabama and the Crimson Tide Sports Network, this is Roger Hoover saying thank you for listening and watching today's edition of Crimson Drive presented by Coca-Cola. We'll see you Thursday right back here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network.